Today we're going to look at drawing cartoon feet, and often people get in a bit of a pickle and quite worried about drawing feet. Not as much as drawing hands, but drawing feet can be a little daunting. So we've got a few different things we need to look at. Obviously we've got where the leg comes in and you've got your ankle joint there. And we've got this part of the foot, and of course we've got these toes. Although often when you're drawing, what you're actually drawing is feet in shoes or boots, so that's not quite so much of a problem. You don't always have to worry about the toes. But I'm going to show you a few hacks about how you can draw cartoon feet quick and easy, getting the basic principles in place. So the first thing I want to introduce you to when it comes to drawing feet is what I call the doorstop principle. And this little rubbery wedge that you probably remember from your childhood is the best way that I can think of showing you how to draw feet really simply. Because drawing feet involves a little bit of perspective, and as you can see here, we can see what's going on with the perspective. So let's imagine our leg coming in. Let's just draw it as a stick leg. You've got your ankle joint here, and then the foot does tend to stick out a little bit at the back. We've got our ground line going along like this, and the bottom of the foot coming through, and then you've got the side of the foot, which does tend to look like this kind of a wedge. And you've got this perspective thing going on because you can see part of the top of the foot. Here you would have your big toe on the far side and your little toes coming down towards the edge. So while this is obviously somewhat narrower than a real foot might be a little shorter and a little wider than this, it gives us a superb analogy for starting to understand what a foot should look like. Now it's time to test out our sketching that we did and use the wedge principle to create ourselves a foot. So we've got the leg coming in, ankle bone, we've drawn in our wedge. Big toe, we're drawing the opposite foot this time. This is now the left or the right-hand foot, so big toe nearest to us. And filling in with orange over the sketch just to get something a little smoother. And now putting in the sole of a shoe, I'm going to draw a thong or slip-slop first of all. Then we can see if we decide to go for a slightly more elaborate sandal with a couple of broad straps over the foot, and then a strap that goes behind the heel. And then finally we can quickly turn this into a boot. So we just put our boot round the leg, bring it down, making sure that we've got a sole which joins onto and implying the roundness of the surfaces, so the roundness of the toe and the roundness of the leg. Feet being what they are, you generally see them from the top downwards somehow, so one needs to be able to draw them also in bird's eye perspective. And once again, your little rubbery wedge picture, now taken from a different angle, can prove incredibly useful when it comes to getting to grips with that. The vertical lines just show that the side of the foot is at a right angle to the ground. And once you've done a very rough sketch, then you can come along and practice putting some shoes on it again. So this time I'm going to put a pair of sneakers on here, very, very rough. I'm putting in the rounded toe and making sure that I get that flat bottom section. There's the thick sole going in, the laces, and the bend in the lines just gives you that impression of roundness so that you haven't got too boxy a foot. So it takes the angles off your wedge. Of course, drawing feet is a whole lot more challenging than just drawing them static, because most of the time you're drawing people with their feet in motion. And so what we need to do is make sure that we put in a way of dealing with feet that are actually moving or walking. So walking or running is probably the most common. Let's just deal with walking for now. So here we have our leg coming in, we've got our ankle bone, here we've got our wedge shape, and you can see that there's a bend here. So in anatomy terms, you have this from the ankle backwards is called the hind foot, this bit in the middle is called the midfoot, and then the very front of the toes, which is quite flexible, is called the forefoot. And the forefoot is where it bends. So that's pretty much what you need to watch out for, is that partway through your wedge shape, you're going to have a bend with this area here being horizontal along the ground. The key when you start drawing your own foot in a shoe or a boot is to have the ground line in place so that you can get that horizontal bit at the beginning and then get the lift off here. From there you have to have your leg pretty much at 90 degrees to this part, not to this part, otherwise it'll look rather strange. So that's how you would start to get a feel for the fact that this part of the foot is straight on the ground still as the foot rolls through, and this bit is lifting off. Another thing where you see perspective coming into play once again with walking feet is if someone's walking towards you, you'll tend to see the underside of their foot like this, and then you'll see their shoe going up a little bit. So it's important to be able to recognize that as well, and to know that you've got to show that this is a flat facet and different from this one. One last thing, let's take a look at the possibility of you wanting to draw a character wearing killer heels. Now, this is more challenging than it looks, so if you don't get it right on the first 100 times, do not be dismayed. But the trick that I've discovered, if there is a trick to it at all, is always having a ground line and being able to figure out where the horizontal part of the shoe is, a little bit like the walking foot again, and know that the heel of the shoe here is always going to be at right angles to the imaginary ground line, passing underneath the point of the heel and then underneath the flat sole. So if we were to draw in the imaginary ground line here, it would go pretty much like that, passing underneath the point of that stiletto and along the horizontal, what would be horizontal if this foot was on the ground, along the bottom sole of the shoe. Sometimes the temptation is to put the heel at 90 degrees to this part of the shoe. Then you end up with the heel like that and your shoe looks extremely wonky. Before you start creating your own real-life cartoon stilettos, I suggest you do some tracing of the real thing so that you can figure out how all the different pieces and angles fit together.